Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Susan Lindner, your host of Innovation Storytellers, where we get behind the innovation and get to the stories that got that amazing innovation across their finish lines. And it's one of the reasons I'm really excited to have my guest with me here today, Paul Campbell. And if you don't know Paul, you absolutely should. He is considered one of the world's experts on corporate innovation, helping create more than 50 new businesses that generated more than $5 billion in growth. His experience with a broad range of business models and technologies and products globally lends him a very unique perspective on how to address innovation and leadership challenges inside of companies of all sizes, really. Paul helped leadership teams from companies like Hewlett-Packard, Philips Electronics, Schneider Electric, W.L. Gore and Associates, Altria, Mercedes-Benz, and Polaris assess the cultural, structural, and leadership changes necessary to foster an environment of innovation in large organizations that optimizes capital deployment and ROI on R&D and innovation programs. Of even more value in some cases, Paul's teams earned spots on Fast Company's prestigious Most Innovative Companies list, improving brand equity significantly. And Paul has advised the World Economic Forum, the European Commission, startups, and numerous accelerators and incubators around the world. Now, he's on the show today because he and his co-author, Stefan Barschat, have codified their understanding of how to address corporate innovation challenges in their new book, The Corporate Innovator's Playbook. Written by practitioners for practitioners, that's all of you listeners. The Corporate Innovators Playbook shares a framework for understanding a company's strengths and potential blind spots, which all of us have. Filled with tips and best practices, this book is a must-read for all executives looking to optimize their innovation program for growth and impact. This book is super exciting, and I can't wait to talk about it with you.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I have a question for you. Everyone who comes on the show defines innovation differently. What is your definition of innovation?
So, in the context of the book, it's really innovation is creating new businesses, new unicorns, new large businesses for companies that help them move into new markets, new technologies, and new spaces overall. So, not incremental, not sustaining innovation, not even sort of near adjacency, but really the new innovations that change the direction of business growth.
So important. It's not baby steps, it's big steps.
Big steps, indeed.
So let's dive into it. Why now this book? Why did you decide to write this book at this stage? You've seen it all through some of the biggest companies that I just mentioned. Why was it important to you to write a book?
Quite simply because it's one that hasn't been written. We've been practitioners of innovation inside of large companies for decades, Stefan and I, and we kept seeing lots of books written about leadership, innovation, ideation, inspiration, but not much about impact, not much about the real sausage making that happens behind the scenes to make innovation happen inside of large companies. And I tried to get other people to write it because, writing a book to me sounded like, getting a root canal. It just didn't seem like the best,
100%.
it's just, but no, I talked to people and they said, no, talk to big name authors who you would know. And they said, no, this would probably, this would detract from my brand and, things like that. So no one would take it up. So Stefan and I kind of just picked ourselves up by the boots and started writing and it came together. And I think the other part, so that was one part. The other motivation is right now. It's a very interesting time, Susan. It's very interesting. When you look at what's been happening in large companies for the last 6 years, they've been dealing with disruption after disruption. And I don't have to go through the list. We all know them. And as a result, there's been this kind of retrenching of resources toward the core business to keep, batten down the hatches, all hands on deck. Let's keep this thing afloat. And as a result, that's created, in my opinion, kind of an unhealthy balance of resources toward, business as usual and the core. And if you had asked me a year ago, kind of the status of innovation leadership, I would have said, it's pretty slow right now. There's a lot of innovation teams being reduced, disbanded, and stuff like that, and resourced down. But today, with this little thing called AI, you're seeing this new disruption that's creating new opportunities for innovation leaders to really exercise their muscle inside of large companies to do great things. So you're seeing, I've heard this every week for the last 6 months, innovation leaders saying, yeah, we're rebuilding a team. I just joined last month and we're going to rebuild our innovation program. I just joined and I just, have a new mission. So you're seeing a lot of resurgence in innovation, I think, because AI is causing the C-suite and the board to ask questions about where is AI, how is it going to impact us positively? So the good thing is AI is a tool, but there needs to be the sausage making behind the tool to really help convert AI into good opportunities for large companies. And I think that's where the corporate innovators playbook will be very helpful for people.
Okay, so can we just have this conversation for just a second? Because I'm hearing, so we're 5 years into innovation storytelling, 250 corporate innovation leaders on this podcast. And there is a debate that has been raging since I was at the Innovators Conference in Berlin last September. Is AI eating the innovation role? Because AI is being driven by IT and business unit leaders who want the productivity promises of AI, but are lacking. Suddenly, all the other innovation that we're talking about seems to fall by the wayside as we're trying to pursue AI as innovation. That's one question. And the other is so much AI work is being driven without strategy. It's being done as at the user level as opposed to the strategic level. And as a result, so much money is being wasted on AI. I was just listening to a creator on Instagram who consults with large companies and said, I found someone who is using Figma, whatever their highest level use of AI is, to convert a Word document to a PDF. So tokens are being spent on the most innate tasks at the highest level of this gold standard technology because no one's been given any any guardrails of how to even spend the budget. So I'm going to stop there, but I'm so curious. Is AI eating the innovation team?
That's a
Number
great
one.
question.
And number two is, are we doing it all wrong when we don't have a larger innovation strategy that guides the use of AI the same way it would have digitization, the cloud, hell, even the metaverse and blockchain when we were having that conversation, which seems to have died.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
I'm chuckling because it's such a great question. It's such an insightful question. And I think a year ago I would have said, yeah, AI is eating innovation budgets and teams, as is the business as usual focus. But I think what's happened is there's been a transition, and to your point, and the reason is, and Wing Capital did a great article about 3, 4 months ago, and they identified AI's benefits in three categories, what I call them three tiers. And tier one is drudgery, tier two is democratization, and tier three is discovery. I have a slide on this. I can share it with you, but the first two, drudgery and democratization, are all about implementing ChatGPT, Claude, I mean, name your platform, and getting that work that we don't want to do more automated, easier, better, improve the quality of our emails, improve the quality of our annual review writing sessions, improve our PowerPoint slides, etc. Democratization is all around taking all the information. Tier two, democratization is all around taking all the information available for a process or a function. Let's say text-rich applications like legal or market research, and bringing all that information together and helping to make better informed decisions and better processes and better quality output for those functions. So that's democratization. And as you point out, that's all about efficiency, doing that faster, cheaper, and better. And they made estimates of 2 to 10% efficiency gains for drudgery, 20 to 30% gains for democratization. But the tier three that they talked about is discovery. And discovery is all about the world of innovation. It's all about new products, new business models, changing fundamentally the industry and competitive landscape of markets. This is where AI is just beginning to emerge as a tool for corporations. Only about 5% of companies, of legacy companies, are deploying AI for discovery. 95% of it is in democratization and drudgery. Why is that? As you point out, because those two areas are the domain of IT. And they're being run by the CIO, they're being run by the Chief Information and Transformation Officer, et cetera, et cetera. And they're running that execution and deployment like they do every project, every software project. It's a new software tool being deployed. Okay, so agree with you totally. And this tier one, two, tier three stratification really helps me to explain what's coming next, which is now the gap is in that change from tier two to tier three, that business, that technology to business gap. Either the IT teams don't understand the business needs that companies need for, yeah, real innovation and growth, or the innovation teams may not understand the AI and the technology behind the AI successfully enough to be able to deploy AI successfully. So you're seeing a gap there, and that's slowing down the adoption. And so does that, I mean, does that kind of make sense? Like that
Yeah,
framework? And
absolutely.
what I like about that is it helps to explain what's coming next, which is the need for AI for discovery. And what you're seeing is, and this has just happened in the last few weeks, you're seeing companies like Microsoft and others announcing these, what they're calling these multi-billion dollar efforts around what they call forward deployed engineers. And FDEs are the new buzzword for AI because it's where they're taking their engineers at the companies like Microsoft and Google and others and putting them inside the walls of the corporation to be able to make this transition from the technology, the platforms, to the business needs of the companies. So, and this is super interesting because now you're seeing the companies actually deploying software and engineers to drive adoption inside large companies. So I think this will lead to more discovery and more focus on innovation. Okay, totally agree. So I think that what you have seen is a reduction in innovation because of AI, but you're seeing now is an increase in focus on innovation and growth. I can guarantee you, I've heard this from multiple CFOs. CFOs are saying, I'm spending all this money on AI, I'm seeing some efficiency gains, but who's working on growth? Who's working on my growth opportunity? Where's my growth going to come from as a result of AI? I need, so I can't just keep raising prices. I can't just keep, pumping more stuff through the factories. We need to find
Mhm.
new sources of growth. So it's a big switch happening right now. And that's why I was smiling so broadly when you asked the question. It's a great time to be in innovation with AI because there's so many great tools. There are great tools out there doing discovery types of work that companies can tap into.
So let me ask you a question then. Is this a messaging issue for us innovation folk that we need to change our title to Chief AI Officer, that we need to change our title to Chief Growth Officer? Because people recognize innovation as having a track record of lots of failed pilots leading to an amazing success, right? Every venture capital firm, 9 out of 10 investments or 8 out of 10 investments never reach their full potential. And so we're familiar with that model. In the corporate world, it feels like there's no incentive for that business model to thrive, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
is this a messaging issue? Because Google changed its innovation sandbox. I think Walmart closed theirs down. 4 big innovation centers within the US government have since closed. And so I know it's a pendulum effect. Like longtime
Yeah,
innovators like you see the pendulum that goes, okay, we're going to
yeah.
bring this back down to the business units. And then they're too busy hitting their KPIs each quarter. They don't have room to innovate. And then it comes back and we're going to make these little islands, where the larger corporate base can't swallow the great ideas that might cannibalize that business unit leader's product. So where are we in that swing, do you think, Paul?
Well, I think to your first question, AI I mean, it has a lower ranked perception than than in the general market than ICE, the government organization that's deporting people, right? AI is ranked lower than ICE as far as perception.
Yeah, we saw
Um,
that in all those commencement speeches, right? Where you saw
yeah,
Eric Schmidt
exactly.
or Google getting booed off the stage talking positively about AI. They're like, that thing is about to swallow my job.
Yes, exactly. And so I don't know how if we want to take innovation and growth leaders and have them grab onto AI too closely, because the bottom line, Susan, is AI is just another tool. And as growth and innovation leaders, we've seen tools come and go. We've seen, like you mentioned before, metaverse and digital currency, which, both are getting had digital currency more than metaverse are getting traction. But others, mobile, cloud, everything has, social media, everything has been a wave of technology, and we've had to surf over those. But in the long game, we are innovation and growth leaders. We're not, AI leaders, and that's the job of IT. What the point of kind of separating the domain of IT from the domain of innovation is we need to change this around to the conversation around to, okay, this is a great tool. Where's the best place for me to put that tool to work for us? I think you're right. I think AI is going to fill the funnel of every innovation leader's bucket to the point where they've got more great ideas than anything. I mean, we ran at the last company I worked with, we ran an employee ideation submission contest. And the idea, and we had them use an AI tool to write their business case. And the quality was unbelievable. I mean, we couldn't believe how good of quality we got from people who had never done this before.
What
So
tool were you
AI,
using out of curiosity? Because I'm sure a lot of my listeners would love to know.
sorry,
What tool were you using? I'm curious. I'm sure a lot of my listeners would love to
we
know.
were using a tool called Fifth Row, fifthrow.com.
I know them
Yeah,
very well. They're in the
yeah,
Czech Republic. Yes,
yes,
I was
yes.
just in Prague a month ago talking to those guys.
Okay.
Yep.
It's a brilliant tool, and we liked to, as we presented it to our employees, we told them this is like getting a business case written in a matter of an hour, a complete comprehensive business case written in an hour that normally would take, weeks and months to write by our
Yeah.
strategy team or even an external consulting firm. So you really can accelerate and get high quality ideas very quickly. So, and now the job becomes how do you test them? How do you, create pilots and POCs and all that kind of stuff. So the job of the innovation team just got really much more difficult because of this flood of ideas. And that's just an idea contest, let alone all the ideas coming from outside and ideas coming from strategy and the board and everything. So I think AI is a great tool that innovation leaders and growth leaders want to deploy in
Mm.
ways that create new products, new business models, new market opportunities, et cetera, that if, they want to do, and if they don't do it, that the risk is that someone else will do it and they'll eat into their business. And I don't want to be a Cassandra here and say, that this is going to turn out badly for companies, but boy, they really want to be quick to whisper in their CFO's ear saying, we need to invest in growth opportunities. We have so many ideas, so much opportunity. We need to put more resources behind this because we'll miss out. And that's a message that the CFO will invest in because he or she, they are tired of investing in AI for efficiency gains when the board and the shareholders are asking for growth.
Yes. And and a reminder for those of us who aren't familiar with Cassandra. Cassandra was the one who always spoke the truth, but her curse was that no one would believe her. And so I'm encouraging all of you to be the Cassandras, whether or not, because that's what storytellers do. We tell the truth, especially in innovation of what's coming next, whether or not the people around the boardroom table want to hear it, because we are seeing things that other people can't see. Now, what's really important is how we actually tell the stories to our listener so that they can absorb these truths that we're bringing to them. And I know you have a storied past in innovation, Paul, and I'm sure there are innovations that you have worked on where the innovation was great and you probably didn't even need a very powerful story in order to sell the idea. but in other cases, it's not so evident what the benefit is or where the growth is going to come from or a remucking of a business model. Can you give us some examples, Paul? And I'd love some of them from the book. I mean, the book is structured so beautifully that it really walks you through what I was reading and going, oh, these are all the agonies around being in innovation. It's like
Yeah.
the joys and the agonies of living through innovation. Some of the
Yeah.
stories you've experienced around the innovative breakthroughs that you've worked on.
I tell you, one of the first ones that really demonstrated what it took to do innovation well inside a large company was when I was at HP. And this goes back a few years, but I was asked to work on a project to help HP enter the China market. And this is back when every corporation needed a brick strategy, right? Brazil, Russia, India, and China. You needed to have a brick strategy or else you were going to miss out on the growth for the next decades. And HP wanted to have a brick strategy, and my assignment was China. So I went to Shanghai, and the team there greeted me basically by saying, who did you piss off to get this assignment, Paul? And I said, what do you mean? And they said, well, we've tried 10 times to enter China, and we've failed each time. And no one has ever survived this assignment. So it was a pretty beat down team. And yet, so the vision, the mission, the job to be done was clear. We needed to win in China, but no one knew how. So, here I am coming from Silicon Valley, going to Shanghai, thinking that I'm going to come up with a better plan. And the CEO's instructions were become more Chinese than the Chinese. Act more Chinese than Chinese, which was a great vision. So anyway, I show up and I get this greeting and I said, I asked, can I read those 10 plans that you've written before? And sure enough, they had, the three-ring binder and, whatever, and they were there ready for me. So I read the plans, and what I noticed, Susan, was that each time they had approached it incrementally. They're like, oh, let's just change this pricing model, or let's just change the product this time, or let's change the go-to-market motion, or let's change our advertising. Each time they tried one part of the business model to change, but they didn't try it all. And so I went back to the team and I asked them, why haven't you done it all? And they laughed and chuckled and said, because no one would approve that. No one would ever approve such a bold plan. And I said, well, but this has the board support. This has the C-suite support. The CEO personally. And they said, that doesn't matter. It's not going to work. Our leadership will not approve it. And I said, what will it take? And they said, well, if the CEO talked to us directly, and I said, okay, great. So I talked to the CEO, my next debrief, and I explained the situation. And she said, listen, let me talk to the team. Is it okay if I talk to the team? And I said, sure. So we scheduled a meeting the next day. And word got out that the CEO was going to be talking to this project team. And there was about 8 people on the team. And all of a sudden, people were sending me notes saying, can I join the meeting? Can I join the meeting? And we had like 50 people in the meeting by
Oh
the
my
time
gosh.
the meeting was
Everyone
held.
wants FaceTime with the CEO.
Everybody wants to FaceTime with the CEO, which turned out to be great. Carly gets on and she says, I understand there's a question about how bold this team should be. And I said, yes. And she said, listen, this is the most important thing we do. And I'm the CEO of a $120 billion company. There is no plan you can put on my table that will be too bold. And as a matter of fact, if you do, I will give you a bonus equal to your annual salary if you put a plan too bold on my desk. And because this is really important. And everybody's looking around like, is this real? Is this really the CEO talking? And sure enough, Susan, I swear to God, one of the hands in the back from one of the bureaucrats raised up and said, I have a question. And the CEO asked any questions, and the HR person said, we don't have a mechanism for giving a bonus equal to the annual pay. We don't have a bonus structure that big. And
Jesus.
and and I'm like, oh no. And Carly said, can you give me the email and name of the person who asked that question? Because I don't think they heard me when I said I'm the CEO of a $120 billion company. This is strategically important, and there is no plan that's too blah, blah, blah. And all the other hands that were up from the bureaucrats in the back all went down when she
Good.
responded that way. What Carly did at that point was she drilled through the frozen middle layer of management. She went straight to the team, not through the executives, and said, "You can innovate." And she said, "Is there any questions?" No. Okay, thanks. And I look forward to seeing your plans. Hung up. And the team erupted in cheers. They threw their paper up in the air. They're high-fiving each other. They couldn't believe that they had just gotten permission to be as innovative as they could. And the ideas came storming out. We had great proposals. We presented them. Carly approved them. We went back. We implemented them. And we went from zero market share in China to number four market share in 9 months, eventually growing to number two. And we changed the PC industry forever
Which was really
because,
IBM dominated at the time, right? It was like big
well,
pad
ex
stuff, right?
exactly. And what
Yeah.
happened was there was a little company called Lenovo in China that was talking about expanding around the world because they were so successful in China. And we went into China and beat them in their own, not beat them, but threatened them at their own game. And as a result, they rethought their model and they ended up buying IBM. And that, well, sorry, that was a little company called Legend. And they bought IBM, turned into Lenovo, and that's who we know today as Lenovo. But
Wow.
we changed that whole dynamic because Legend was going to expand themselves, and they realized they couldn't. Anyway, so I learned two things. Number one, incrementalism is dangerous.
It
You
is.
need to be as bold as you can. And I've learned from CEOs and C-suites and boards over the years, they want bold plans, but they keep asking their leadership team and their innovation leaders, I want bold plans. Give me bold plans. And what happens is the gravitational pull of the businesses reduces those bold plans down to incremental plans. And that's what was happening in China. So bold plans, get them in front of the CEO. You don't know what's going to happen if, and the boards and stuff. Number two was just, I really get, Susan, I really get frustrated when I hear advice like, hey, you need CEO sponsorship. You need CEO buy-in to your plans. What you saw with that was not CEO sponsorship. You saw CEO engagement and active participation and killing, not killing, it's a wrong word, but really eliminating the internal, the frozen layer that was going to stop this innovation and turn it into nothing. She's melted that away and took care of that. So I'm a big fan of really getting CEOs deeply involved and engaged to the point where they are putting personal capital behind innovation. Since I've had CEOs say, Paul, I'm not willing to do that. I can't put personal capital behind innovation right now. I've got too many other things. And I said, great, then don't call it innovation, call it something, or don't, rescale your plans because you're not going to, but have that conversation. How much are you really willing to personally drive this initiative? Because it's going to take more than just me as the innovation leader to do this. I'm going to need you, I'm going to need the board and a few other people on to really drive this and make it happen. So two big important learnings for me, and that resulted in a successful outcome, a unicorn for the company.
And it's so important, like, just dissecting that experience. It is creating a level of emotional security for people in the room and emotional safety in the room to say, I have your back if you take a risk. Because that middle management permafrost, Chris Bresser called it, which I think is like such the perfect word for
That's
it. It's
perfect.
permafrost. And my friend Peter Temis at ILO, the Institute for Innovation at Large Organizations, has looked at some of the research. And the reality is, in most companies, if you are over 50 and you are a higher level executive in a large corporation and you back an innovation that dies, your likelihood of getting a raise or a promotion in the rest of your career drops dramatically. And so the
Interesting.
risk for that middle management permafrost is real and tangible and financial, not to mention the reputational risk that comes with that. So part of the effort, I think, of working hand in hand with the CEO is a reminder that you have to create that level of security if you want the big, bold innovation. You say you want it, but what are the consequences that will happen when those plans don't work? Because not all of them will, right? I don't know what the experience in China was, but I imagine that some of those ideas did not come to the level of fruition that you had hoped, right? And what was the consequence for those individuals for when their plans weren't as shining and bright as the other ones that were taking place? And were they
Yeah.
okay? Were they safe?
Yeah. Well, and if we had a lot of time, I could go into all the things we had to change in China. It wasn't just, hey, Carly said go do it, and we did it, and everything was great. we had
Yeah.
to change a lot. I mean, we had to, that was the other part of, that was the other learning there was how much we had to change in that bold plan. We had to change the business model. We had to disrupt. And this is where I created the term deconstruction.
Mm.
And I have loved that term. Maybe I'm the only one, but it's the concept of deconstruction is this. I mean, take a Lego set that's shaped like a castle, and you take it and you dismantle it. You're not destroying the pieces. You're not breaking the pieces. You're not melting them down. You're just taking them apart, and then you're reconstructing it into a Millennial Falcon, right? Millennium Falcon, or so, so you have a new thing that's modern, current, and cool. At least it was a few years ago. So, but the idea is, you have the ability to take the assets of your company and reshape them. So we had to deconstruct our go-to-market motion, our manufacturing model, our HR model. We even had to disrupt partners. We had to go to Microsoft and say, listen, in China, software piracy is a fact of life. It's a fact of business. And we can either ignore it and try to sell, more, the old fashioned, the old way of putting, X dollars for every PC for Microsoft Windows, or the fact is that has zero value to Chinese consumers. So going to your point up front about understanding deeply what consumers want, we had to understand that the Chinese market, this goes back to the CEO's directive, act more Chinese than the Chinese. We had to understand that software piracy and virtually free labor were the core problems that we had to solve. And we did. And we got Microsoft's help. They came up with a version of Windows that was 25% of the price of Windows in the US for the Chinese market. And that took care of a big part of our cost gap. Anyway, so all those things, I don't think they come out in the book. Susan, we would have had
It would
about a
have been an
500 page
encyclopedia.
saga. So, but this is part of what we talk about is being bold and going to the point of deconstructing you, your channel partners, your suppliers, anybody and everybody that has to be involved in this transformation and this deconstruction needs to be at the table and supporting this bold plan. And Carly helped us on all that.
And I'm so curious about it's my own penchant as a woman, but I'm very curious about the reception. We have lots of conversations about how the story gets told, and how people respond and listen is also really different. I remember, I think it was the head of protocol who wrote a book about her experience in the Obama White House, right? And the head of protocol is
Mm.
the person who talks about, who determines, what is the appropriate gift to give the Sultan of Brunei, right, when they come for a state
Mm.
visit. And
Uh-huh.
it's all the order and manners and etiquette of how countries conduct themselves at the state level. And she was talking about how even someone who seems to be as progressive and forward thinking as someone like President Obama, that the women around the table had to strategize how they would discuss their ideas at the table. One person would raise an idea, a second person would say, can you repeat that idea? A third person would say, I really love that idea. And they would practice this before going into
Mm.
meetings, because so often those brilliant ideas were getting lost or talked over or co-opted by someone else at the table. And for corporate innovators, there's a lot of this kind of message, like, how do I get the message across in the way that my CEO, CFO, CTO, oftentimes men, are communicating those ideas? I'm so curious what it was like when a female CEO stands at the front of the room and says, I demand innovation from my team. And to hear you say they threw their papers in the air and they were thrilled, was that a universal response? Or did you find some people who were like, this isn't the way we've always done it kind of response?
Well, it's funny on that in that situation. You had a team that was pretty willing to follow the boss's directive, and so a directive was the right approach.
Hmm.
And that was a successful outcome. In another case, again at HP with Carly. I mean, I came back from China, and Carly said that was pretty good. What do you want to do next? And I said, well, how about give me 30 days and I'll come back with some ideas. And I did. And I gave her 3 ideas and she said, great, do all 3 of them. And she saw my jaw hit
Isn't
the
that nice?
table.
Yeah.
And she said, I know, Paul, that's a scary thought, but these are really good ideas and they're really important and we have to do them. Go make them happen. and let me know what you need. So anyway, and one of those was a project that we called digital entertainment. And it was the idea that HP was just at the consumers were just after the dot-com build out and and high speed broadband was coming to homes. Consumers were figuring out what to do with that high speed.
Mm.
And we came up and we were curious also because at the time, in early, I mean at the turn of the century, the average download speeds to homes were 512 kbytes, right? Very, very slow. Now we have, gigabit download speed, so massively slow connections to the internet. But fiber had been built up. Broadband had been coming. So we started to see faster and faster speeds. And the question was, what will consumers do with this? And so we asked that question. Actually, someone advised us that if we wanted to find out what consumers would do with high speed access, just go to South Korea. And because they've had megabit download speeds for years. So we did, and guess what we saw, Susan? We saw, this is in the early 2000s, we saw, yeah, people were downloading movies, they were sharing songs, they were chatting, they were
Napster.
uploading
Yep.
photos.
Mhm.
We saw the future. This goes to your point up front of understanding deeply what consumers want. So we saw that entertainment was at the center of what consumers wanted to do with the speeds that they were going to have that they didn't have yet. So we started building out a digital entertainment strategy, and we ended up launching things like smart televisions. So at CES 2004, we launched one of the first connected smart televisions, which today you would see as, your streaming TV that you buy off the shelf at whatever, very easily. Back then, it was a new concept. Everybody had cable TV, and you had to buy a dumb TV, and you bought a cable box, and it was a pain in the butt. And you had those stupid access, screens and stuff. Really, really a bad experience compared to today. But we launched
Mm.
the first smart televisions to do that sort of streaming content back in 2004. But going back to your question, so we had the strategy in 2003. Carly launched it at CES in January 2004, and in February of 2004, we were still struggling to get the resources that we needed to go fast on the plan. So we had a big meeting with Carly, and we explained the situation. And she threw her pen down on the table, and she said, "You mean to tell me that a strategy that we agreed to, this room agreed to in December, that we had announced to the world in January, still isn't resourced properly? What are we talking about here?" And we gave the numbers. And she said, "Listen, so and so and so, you can't even forecast accurately to that number. You can't even tell me what you're going to generate revenue and profit wise to that level of detail. So you can't tell me this is about the finances. This is about leadership. This is about commitment to this program." So,
Mm.
to your question of how did Carly act in the one case, it was, here's what we need to do. In the other case, she had to twist arms and put people on the spot each other, to their peers, and say, you've got to do this. We've already announced it. She put pressure on everybody by announcing it to the world. So
Mm.
she was
Mm.
a brilliant communicator, knew how to motivate people, and did what she had to in each situation. I saw different sides of her in different situations, but in the end, she was super effective, and I'm probably one of the people that really is admirer of hers. Whereas a lot of people aren't, and she eventually was removed as CEO for reasons that are too long to go into here. But there's been a book written about it, and you can cover that there. Anyway, so very interesting dynamic. And just in contrast, an almost identical situation at Philips with a male leader, and he was faced with the same situation, agreed to strategy, announced to the world, and the team was pushing back. And he said, I was sitting there, he was winding up. He's like, "Okay, I see this. We've done it. We've announced it." And I was winding up thinking, okay, here it comes. He's going to do like Carly did. He's going to browbeat, get people. And he said, "I feel glum." And I
Mm.
said, "What the hell is glum? I don't even know what the hell that means. What the hell
Like
is glum?"
Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh.
"I feel glum." And he said, I'm just disappointed that I'm glum that we are going to trade off our future success for short term, blah, blah, blah. And he acquiesced to the team and he let it happen. And as a result, that whole strategy didn't go anywhere. So it was interesting to see the change, going back to this CEO involvement, engagement, and helping drive innovation, seeing where it didn't happen and how it failed was an amazing contrast just a few years later.
Fascinating. So I want to like thinking about all these different communications methodologies, right? I was like, okay, I have a CEO who says, this is the mandate, go innovate. I have your back. And then our glum picture, right? Which is like, oh, the trade-off for the quarterly returns versus the future of the business. I want to like plot stock valuations based on those kinds of conversations happening in ballrooms. But when we come back to the day-to-day of the innovator, right, who is really facing these kinds of challenges, is my
Yeah.
leadership
Yeah.
really engaged in innovation or are they not? And I think it's part of the innovator's dilemma, if you will, to constantly bring the CEO back to focus on the future, right? And they're
Yep.
thinking about the future stock price, they're thinking about the 3-year plan. But in your experience, and just looking at the table of contents of your book, you start off with what are the impediments to impact? And you begin by creating this innovation canvas. Is that the communications tool that innovators should be using to create the roadmap and to communicate back to the CEO and the CFO and the CTO what's coming next?
It is, Susan. We see, and I've talked about CEO leadership and buy-in. I want to be very clear. That's just one part of an innovator's success inside of
Mm,
large companies. It's one of 10 boxes that we have in the innovation canvas. The reason we created the innovation canvas is because each situation, is what do I do in my situation? The answer is always it depends. It depends on what strategy and leadership is in place. It depends on your culture. It depends on your know-how of the innovation tools of design thinking and lean innovation and open innovation and venturing, just to name a few. So for us, the innovation canvas becomes a tool for the innovation leader to understand what they need to do to improve the effectiveness and the impact of their teams, of the company. So we believe that there are blind spots in most companies that they don't even know. It could be culture, it could be legal, it could be procurement, it could be HR, it could be a lack of consumer intimacy or knowledge, right? Or design thinking addresses that. It could be a lack of a place to nurture new businesses, and we call that a greenhouse, or others would know it as an incubator or an accelerator. But those blind spots can lead to just repeat failure for reasons that is no one, you have a good idea, you've got leadership buy-in, but you don't have the tools in place to really execute. So we think that innovation canvas becomes again, this is from practitioners for practitioners. So the innovation leaders want to use that tool to assess if they have any blind spots that are preventing them from success. Then, sort of in that communication piece to the leadership team and to the CEO and the board and the C-suite, your communication becomes, hey, we've looked at this and we've found a problem that has probably prevented most of our success, or it's slowing us down, or it's reducing our impact. And here's what we're going to do about it. So now you have not only a problem, but you've got the remedy for solving that. If you need to increase your customer centricity, practice, understand and understand and get more training and knowledge around design thinking, for example, as one example. So understand, and then behind that, you generate the evidence of here's an opportunity that we want to pursue, and we're going to pursue it in a new way that we haven't tried previously. And we think that'll increase our chance of success. So you have now a remedy, an opportunity, and more likely success with the board. We put on page 13 of our book, and I hope everybody buys the book and they look at least page 13. But
yes, go out and buy the book.
it's a
Yes,
car it's a cartoon, and it shows and this is from Markatunis, who I love Markatunis.
I
You've probably
love that
seen this.
guy. Love that guy.
You probably have seen this cartoon, but it's quite old, from 2011. but it's an inventor. He's got a lab coat on and he's standing by a goose. And he said, I've got the perfect invention, a goose that lays eggs of solid gold. And he's facing the CEO, the CFO, and the CTO. And the CEO, seeing this and standing in front of $3 million of gold eggs sitting in front of him, the CEO says, that's a distraction, which is a pretty good MVP, by the way. The CEO says, that's a distraction from our core. The CFO says there's no budget, even though there's $3 million literally sitting on the table. And the CTO is holding a hatchet saying we need the liver and the feathers for another project. So as as funny as that is, and we love that because everybody just nods their head and laughs. That is so true. I mean, how is it that when you see the perfect innovation, where is the disconnect where the leadership team looks at it? What glasses are they looking through where they would come up with these absolutely, wrong responses? And so what we do is we work with teams and say, okay, why is this? What is it that's causing those executives to say that? Is it strategy? Is it culture? Is it know-how? Is it leadership? What is it that causes that sort of disconnect between
Yeah.
reality? And
Yeah.
and when you begin to work with teams directly, and we do this a second time around, and we say, okay, now what should they say? And all the leaders know what to say. They say, oh, the CEO should say, oh, we'll change our strategy. We'll communicate this new opportunity. We'll let everybody know it's a great opportunity. CFO will say, I think this can be self-funded. We'll figure that out. CTO should say, hey, I'll create a separate team and we'll really put resources behind this. We'll go after it. This is great. That's what they should say, but they don't. And why is that? So the teams can come up with the right answers. But then, Susan, it's really interesting. We say, let's do this again and let's put your company name on the stand and let's put a project that you are all thinking about, but it's kind of controversial. Let's put that project name on this golden goose. It's not a golden goose anymore. Now it's Project Moonshot. Now put the words back in the speech bubbles. What does the CEO, CFO, and the CTO say? And you'll be amazed. You'll be amazed, Susan. What they say are, well, this is not really as straightforward as the golden. This is not a clear, and they start to come up with answers very similar to the first cartoon. They're a disconnect from reality. And
Mhm.
so you get to the end of it and you say, look what you've done. You know what the right answer is, but something is shaping you and coloring your judgment to come up with the wrong answer. What is it? And now they really get serious. Oh, it's strategy, it's leadership, it's the board, it's HR, it's our culture, we don't have the right people and know-how. Then they really get serious because they realize they've just become a cartoon. So they now want to not become, so now they really get to work. So we love that sort of approach and mechanism. Anyway, so the communication, vehicle, the innovation canvas becomes a communication vehicle to say, this is what we can do better. And we have a scoring mechanism and stuff that helps to kind of put the the company's ability in context of other successful companies, and that also can help. But that is a little bit of challenge, Susan, because in one case, one executive we did this with, the score was pretty low. The Innovation Canvas score was pretty low. And then they said, Paul, we don't want you to come in and tell our executive team how badly we're doing in innovation. And we said, oh my gosh, no, no, no. That's the part, part of high EQ is, understanding that we're not perfect and we ask questions, we learn and we get better and better and better. This is the way to help accelerate that improvement plan. And so, no, I don't want you to do that. And so they canceled any more work. I swear, Susan,
Wow.
18, swear to God, 18 months later, that person called me up and said, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I'm just reaching out. I just want to let you know my team has been disbanded and I'm going to be out looking for, blah, blah. And
Shocker.
I swear to God, Susan, it took every bit of willpower for me to say, I'm so sorry. What can I do to help? Because boy, there was a lot of responses I wanted to say. But if you don't have the right culture of improvement and willing to learn and get better, that's a big red flag. And that kind of thing is surfaced in the innovation canvas, the scorecard, and the like. So anyway, I'm sorry I'm rambling there, but I just
I know
want to
it's a
talk
brilliant
about.
tool. Yeah, it's a brilliant tool. And I really encourage my listeners to please check out the book. And if nothing else, check out what your own innovation score is, right? See where you fall on the category because you might be thinking you're doing moonshots when you're actually in iterative innovation, right? When you could be pushing harder and maybe asking your team to take this test together. I mean, God knows we do enough disc analysis and Myers-Briggs and 1,000 other things to get the job.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, my phone rings off the hook when the employee survey goes out and it says, oh, we scored really low on innovation. And the innovation team is shocked that no one knows about the brilliant pilots and
Yes.
all the things
Yes.
that are going on because they're not telling the story to the rest of the organization about the
Yes.
brilliance. So the other is you might be doing incredible things, but if no one else in the org knows about it, you could be the next 18 months from now on the chopping block if you're not communicating effectively all of the amazingness that you are doing. So
No, that's right. On that scorecard, just to clarify, it's not necessarily what you as the innovation leader know, because you know design thinking, you know lean innovation, you know open it, you know all that. You'll give yourself a high score, but it's not you, it's the company, right? How much does your company practice design thinking, customer centricity, customer intimate? How much does your company know about business model innovation? How much does your company know about? So it's really an assessment of the company,
mm,
not the individual. So I just wanted to clarify
yeah,
that because
thank you.
you could end up, giving yourself a really high score and rightly so, but misunderstand kind of the bigger problem that exists in your company. But also, I want to say that with AI, going back to our friend AI, one of the challenges innovation leaders are facing is bringing in tools, AI tools can be very threatening to existing teams and functions. I was working with a company recently. We brought in a tool, and one of the functions just completely revolted, completely rejected it, and the antibodies went up, and dysfunctional behavior followed, and it was rejected. So kind of like that story before of there are humans involved, and corporations are places where functions protect themselves and stick together and blah blah blah, and relationships really matter. And so it's a very one key storytelling skill that probably I haven't mastered even yet is helping the functions that are being helped by AI to really understand how they can be helped and not replaced or disrupted or lose their jobs, because they feel threatened, and anything that comes from the innovation team can be threatening. Really understanding how this is additive, and this is partly why AI has gotten such a negative acceptance in the market and in culture, is because of the threat that it poses to jobs and stability and stuff. And people are very comfortable in their roles, and they don't want to see those, that change. So very important skill that we all need to become excellent at, and as we bring AI into the discovery phase of innovation.
Well, Paul, I'm going to ask you now the three questions I ask all my guests on the show. And the first one is, what is the greatest innovation of all time?
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna say AI. I'm gonna go with
Wow,
AI.
beautiful.
I think
And
it's amazing.
and we're here to dispel the myth of the one genius innovator who changes everything, because we believe this happens in groups.
Yeah.
Um, if you could join any innovation team in human history, which team would you have joined?
This this is what I would have joined, I was thinking about this. I would have joined those R&D centers like Xerox PARC or AT&T Bell Labs, because they made such amazing inventions and discoveries and then couldn't commercialize it. And that's all I've done is figured out how to. So I would have joined either Xerox PARC or Bell Labs and said, "Help, let me help you," and
Let me help
and
with
then
that
cross
little
my
digital
fingers.
camera issue you have. Let me help with that little mouse you created that
Yeah,
Steve Jobs just kind of took off the desk. Sure, why not? Um,
exactly.
and lastly, what is the innovation that the world needs now?
Something that, one of the things I think more World Cup tournaments. And the reason I
Yes,
say, the
yes,
reason I
yes.
say that is look how the world has come to North America and shown what teamwork and camaraderie and country loyalty and stuff is all about, what it really looks like. I mean, it's just phenomenal to
Mm.
see how much fun these fans are having and demonstrating and showing support for their teams. And I think it's just a great time that for this to happen where we can show such unity and camaraderie. It's just great. So I would say more World Cup, more tournaments like that bring the world together.
I absolutely love it. And who knows, maybe it won't even need to be sport, right? It could be some
Yes.
other thing where we all get so prideful in the best way without feeling like nationalistic. We're just joyous for our people, right?
Love
Without
it.
governments aside and everything else aside. I love seeing those Tartan Army guys walking through
Yes.
Boston and drinking the city dry. There was one interview with a bartender, and he's just like, really nothing left? He's like, what's that? He said, Bud Light, the Scots won't touch it. So Paul, if people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that? And what's the best place to find the book?
LinkedIn is great for me. Find me there. Corporate Innovators Playbook is Paul Campbell, Corporate Innovators Playbook. Of course, all the best, your usual go-to online stores, Amazon and Barnes& and Noble. And also my email is startupgenie@gmail.com, and I'm always available there. So, Susan, this has been a great delight, so much fun, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And we'll be sure to include all of that in the show notes as well. Thanks so
Great.
much, Paul. This was great.
Thank you.